Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Navigating the Work Compass. My name is Kate Luzio. I'm the founder and CEO of Luminary, and I'm here with my co host, Susan Chapman Hughes.
Hello.
And every week we get together, some just us, some with guests, and talk about what it's like right now as we navigate the workforce, the workplace, and everything in between, not just for employees and everyone looking at what's next in their life, but also for leaders and managers and providing real advice and tips. So, Susan, we had a great text chat earlier around connected leadership, but more broadly about how leaders are leading and some cases. So, do you want to kick it off?
Yeah, sure. So thanks, Kate. It's great to see all of you all. It's great to be back with you on Navigating the Work Compass. So this week, I don't know if you've seen or if any of you all saw my post on LinkedIn, but I've been having conversations with several people. Many of you all know I coach a lot of folks and people call me for advice. And there was a theme that has been running for the last couple of weeks that I find fascinating, especially given the times that we're in. And this is the post that I posted. I said recently I've heard more stories of leaders, in quotes, being mean, dishonest, and disrespectful to their team members. It's not okay. It really doesn't take that much to be kind, thoughtful, and respectful, all while leading your team to deliver excellent results and manage through challenges. Your employees will remember how you treat them. And so I posted it, and all of a sudden, like a couple of the other posts where I like struck a nerve, it's going viral. So what we thought we'd do today is just talk about like what's happening, what's up with these. I shouldn't call them crazy, but like really mean, selfish, not so nice people who happen to be in leadership supporting our people. And so we thought we'd just talk about the what we're hearing about it. Number one today, talk about like, hey, leaders, get yourself together. Here's what you need to be in order to not be perceived as being mean, disrespectful, dishonest, gaslighting. I mean, that came up several times in the comments, as
Yeah.
well as people have reached out to me about this whole conversation around gaslighting. And then we wanted to talk to employees about like, well, look, if your leader is behaving this way and this is who they are, what do you do? Like, how do you navigate? How do you think about it? So I
And
think oh, sorry, go ahead.
no. And I would just add, I think the pandemic and the fact, and we've talked about this before around work, whether you're working from somewhere, you're not in an office, maybe you're in an office, new people leaders in the pandemic that maybe haven't had training before. I think this is exacerbated for managers and leaders, and further with the idea of proximity bias. And one of the things, Susan, as I was reading your post and then reading some of the comments, is also a lot of insecurity in these leaders, and their
Yes.
tendency in their gaslighting in the way they manage to micromanage. And I read an article recently that micromanagement is proximity bias's best friend. And so as things come back to whatever normal is, and as people do go back into an office and some don't, this is going to come to a head.
Yes, it absolutely will come to a head. So let's talk about these leaders, right? So you've met them before. You've seen these people. They are, sometimes sheep's and wolves clothing. Sometimes they are just outright mean. Sometimes you walk away from an interaction with them and you're like, wait, what just happened? Am I crazy? Do I actually like, is this actually really? And so I just want to just tell you, first of all, that if you're feeling that way about your leader or leaders you're working with, odds are you probably are right. So trust your gut on this, right? People will show you. I think Maya Angelou has actually, somebody, yeah, it's Maya Angelou. She had a quote that she says, people will show you who they are. It's up to you to believe them. And I think oftentimes people exhibit these behaviors, but because you want the best for them, or you want to like believe that they wouldn't possibly behave that way, they couldn't possibly be doing these things, then you want to give them the benefit of the doubt. And the reality of the situation is like, no, most times you're actually right. And particularly for women and for people of color, this is like a dynamic that they are oftentimes having to face. And it's driven by a lot of different things. But I just want to acknowledge the fact that, first of all, you're not crazy.
Yeah.
Um, these are things that are actually real. People do behave in this way. Some of you all may know I'm writing this book on connected leadership and followership. And the chapter I'm working on right now is all about this conversation of people putting leaders on a pedestal because of their titles.
Yep.
And them not really earning it, and them not living up to the title or the expectation of the title. And then oftentimes, they engage in this behavior. So one of the interesting comments in reaction to my post was, this woman said, yeah, this is true, but we have to recognize that these people are damaged. They are, what else did she say? She's like, they've got issues, they've got all this other stuff. You can go on LinkedIn and read it. But basically, we have to call them out. And my response to her was like, yeah, they are damaged. Yeah, they are problematic. Yeah, they are. But we have to be careful about who the we is.
Yep.
Because the we oftentimes ends up falling on the people who are the ones who are being abused, candidly, and or treated really badly. And that's not your responsibility. So I think the first thing I just want to say is like, look, if it's happening to you, you should say something, you should engage. And we'll talk more about how to do that in this broadcast, but it's not your fault. Like, so, because sometimes people are like, well, if I just change, if I just am more like them, or if I just, behave in a way that, makes them feel comfortable all the time, then maybe things will change. And oftentimes that's just not the case.
I also think, Susan, it's, as you think about this relationship that you have with a leader, right? Number one, are they the leader within your organization? Are they your team leader? Are they a direct manager? Because you may see a leader's behavior, they may not have complete responsibility over you, right? I look in my former life in a banker, I looked at a lot of leaders that didn't mean they were managing me directly, but I had interactions with them and how those interactions went. I think the bigger thing is understanding if that is your direct manager and leader, has the relationship always been this way?
Yeah.
Right. What has changed? Is that just the past 2 years? Is this historic? Do you see it happening to other individuals as well? Yeah. Right. Because you could have a leader who is a pound on the table, pound on their chest for everyone. But then individually is a very different type of leader or manager, right? So I think it's really understanding the situation. And to your point, it's not always about calling out. It's really understanding that situation, knowing your audience, because there is a big fear of retaliation, right? Yeah. And that is a real thing in corporate America around raising it. That's why a lot of organizations have confidential reporting. You can raise an issue, but really understanding the situation and where it started. Has this always been like this? Has it always been not a great relationship? I use that word because I think that's what it ends up being.
Yeah.
And what has changed? Is there something that, we will always do, like, oh, what did I do wrong? What has changed? I mean, I think you know this. A lot of times leaders receive their goals for the next year ahead, and they're higher, and they're told to cut expenses, and they're told to, and they're overwhelmed and they're insecure because guess what? In addition to you having all of that, they're looking at it across the team or the company or the organization. And so really understanding what's happening during that dynamic is important.
Yeah. So it's so interesting because I think you and I both have worked for people in the past who exhibit these bad behaviors, right? Who are dishonest. They gaslight a lot, right? So they try to make it seem like it's not them, it's you. I had this leader once who used to give me feedback all the time, and the feedback was literally always about them and
Yes.
making them feel more comfortable, and like never about making me feel like helping me get better. Because the person was just not positioned to be able to do that. And then when you observed the person's leadership style and the kinds of people that this person wanted to have around them, they wanted to have people who were exactly like them and who didn't challenge them
Exactly.
and who didn't represent whether it's a threat or whatever. But, I think one of the learnings around that is like, you got to be really like paying attention. This is where the organizational politics come into your point about how this person manages. What is it about them that causes this behavior? Because oftentimes, like, again, to the point that the person was making, like, there was something that broke these people or made them insecure, and by the way, that doesn't make it right.
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 That we're just saying that could be the situation.
We're just saying that it is an is thing, but you paying really close attention to how they manage, what are what happens when they get really upset. I had actually one of the best managers I've ever had in my life, and he just had this like very like thin line of like, when something was really good, he was here. When something was really bad, he was here. Something was really good, he was here. Something really bad was here. And I always appreciated the fact that he always kept perspective about the bigger picture, no matter how challenging the situation was that we were going through. And he actively engaged in empathy to learn about what was going on with us, to help us to be that shield against the drama that was happening. But I would just say, like, look, the reality of the situation is of all the times that leaders need to not be behaving this way, it's right now. And it has been over the last couple of years. And, we're getting into this situation where a lot of people are like, oh, we're about to go back to normal, right? Yes. So I hate to let you in on this little secret, but there is no more normal the way it used to be. It just cannot possibly be, given the fact that this pandemic is still going on, despite the fact that some people want to allow folks to go without mask. It doesn't mean you're not going to be at risk to get COVID. And it also means that, there are things like long COVID and other things that could affect you. So you still have to figure out how you're going to navigate your way through this situation, which means it is a new normal. There are also a decent number of leaders who feel like getting back to normal means just like doing the same things that you did before.
Yes.
But we also know that that's not going to happen either, because it's not possible with what happens with fluctuations with schools and the number of women that have dropped out of the workplace and all these other things that have happened. We just have to be really thoughtful about the fact that there's not going to be a new normal, but yet there might be this group of people who you're working for who are expecting you to just behave the way you did before and blindly say yes to whatever decisions that they've made despite the circumstances. And so I think, look, if you're one of these leaders that, and by the way, leaders get feedback, ask people like, well, how am I perceived? And don't get defensive when people tell you something. Like, literally just listen and really like find people who are different than you around the organization, and find people who are courageous, who aren't going to tell you what you want to hear, but actually tell you the truth. And when you hear that they say, listen, it really made me uncomfortable, or it makes me uncomfortable when you do X, or I've observed that, maybe you haven't been as courageous as you could be when you talk to our partners or talk to our team. You haven't been as transparent as you could be. I noticed that, you said this, but you did that, right? And listen for those things. Ask yourself honestly, like, do I actually behave that way, instead of getting defensive and like getting angry or just saying like, F you, I'm still just going to do what I'm going to do. And then ask them for help on, well, what do you think I should do that could help me change the behavior? Now, listen, I will also say that for leaders who behave this way, and, there are some of you out there, if you need therapy, get therapy. Because, I remember telling a team of people about this one leader who was behaving badly and whatever. I was like, well, look, they were probably having these issues before they came to the office. They were just exasperated by the fact that they were at the office because it's more stress. But like, let's be clear, that's who they are. They don't behave differently when they get home, because they'd be like, oh my goodness, I can't believe it. Like, can you believe that so and so is like, yeah, I can't believe it, because they're not consistent when they're around. So I think leaders, be introspective, get some feedback as to whether or not you are engaging in these behaviors. And by the way, sometimes you might engage in these behaviors and it may not be intended. You may not realize how you are being perceived or how people are receiving the actions that you are initiating. Just, one more thing. And that is, years ago, one of my mentors actually said to me, she's like, you know what? You got a really strong personality. And like, some people take you like one way, other people take you another way. It's really up to you to be very cognizant about how people receive the messages that you send, both verbally and non-verbally. And when she gave me that advice, and I started like really paying attention to body language, to tone of voice, to whether or not people were like leaning in, eye contact, like all those things actually started giving me really interesting clues about how the audience that I was engaging with, whether it be one-on-one or in a group or giving a speech to 5,000 people, helped me really, really dig down into giving those organizations, those people or whatever, what they needed, not necessarily what I wanted, and to make sure I was connecting on the things that were most important.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, with everything that you said, I wanted to just to add a couple of things. I think there's also as leaders and as managers, and they're two very different things, but a leader has people responsibility, as is a manager. How you provide feedback is critical. Is it real feedback that's constructive, or is it criticism? And
Right.
a lot of insecure managers and leaders just go to the criticism. That's easy. It's much more difficult, but much more productive if you think about, let's make this a productive conversation and real constructive feedback.
Yep.
On the back of that is this whole concept of 360-degree feedback, right? And I'll use a couple of small examples. When I was at JP Morgan, that was a very big process, was 360-degree feedback. And I remember my first time getting it. And you have to get it from all of your direct reports. It's anonymous.
Right.
And then you had to pick, I think at the time was 5 to 10 sort of stakeholders that you had some type of influence over, the product partners, your finance manager, whatever. The first time I read it, I was like, oh my God, I do that. I do this. Oh my gosh. And so without actually trying to deduce who said all of these things, I really, like you said, introspectively said, okay, tone, body language. I was also living in London. I was American. I'm coming in. I was the newbie coming from Bank of America into JP Morgan culturally, right? Really understanding all of that. And I think 360-degree feedback actually can serve a really great purpose, because it may, as a leader, make you aware of things that you don't know you're doing, to your point, Susan. I think
Right.
the other thing is it can help start to break down some barriers that you may have with an individual on your team members, your stakeholders, where communication might be an issue. And so I think that if companies don't have that, many small companies aren't going to have that yet. But how do you put in a process where there is a real opportunity for a two-way street of feedback? As a manager and leader, I want that. I want to know what I'm doing. Maybe it's subconsciously, maybe it's, I just don't even realize it. I'm a passionate person, so sometimes that can be misconstrued as anger or I'm super emotional. And then the other thing that I would say is, and I have had those same bad managers and had some great managers, is inherently people are good, right? And so really, are there ways for you to create an environment, even offline, to have a conversation that's productive and constructive with that leader? I'll give you one example. Same organization, JP Morgan. I got feedback from my direct manager at the time that a product partner was very unhappy with me. Didn't like my tone, didn't like my aggressiveness, for lots of different reasons. And he basically said, listen, he's in the US. When he comes to London, maybe go grab a coffee with him. We went and grabbed a beer instead, right? And that was fine. And I just said, listen, tell me, let's have a real conversation around what's working and what's not working between us. Because remember, Susan, as we said earlier, it's not just about your direct manager. A
That's right.
leader can also be someone that's not, you don't have that direct responsibility to or linkage to, but they are part of your performance review. They sit in that room. You are a topic of conversation. And honestly, it was the best beer, and I'm not a beer drinker, I've ever had, because he said how he likes to be communicated to. I said how I like. How did we meet in the middle? How did we make it a productive relationship? He ended up being one of my best, not only product partners, sponsors within the organization, because we kind of cut out the bullshit and figured out how to kind of make it a workable situation without gaslighting, without being mean, without being derogatory, and without belittling, because that's a word that I don't think that we use enough. We see a lot of leaders and managers that belittle their staff.
They do. And they, because, in the words of my grandmother, they start believing their own hype, even though it wasn't there. And so, having a really big title can be very intoxicating, and it can be lonely, right? And it could be a lot of different things, but it really is up to each leader to earn their way back to the ground, to like really make it an extra special effort to connect with their people. And when you get the feedback, go figure out what you can do. Now, some companies will get people executive coaches. I've seen this where they're like, oh, the person's really difficult, get them an executive coach, and the coach will come and give them the plan. They still don't follow the plan. Look, if they don't, then it's really incumbent upon organizations to act decisively. Like, those people can't be a part of your organization if they consistently and on a regular basis, like, engage and behave like that. And never has it been more important than right now, because people have a lot of choices about where they're going to work, right? And, most people leave their organizations because of their manager. It doesn't really, most times it doesn't come down to the fact that, oh, you're not paying me enough. Now, look, if they find out you're not paying them what they deserve, then that's going to be problematic. And they're going to be pissed at the manager about why the manager didn't go fight for them or make sure that they got that support. But most people leave because they can't work for somebody because that person is like very challenging, belittles them, doesn't, take the extra effort to connect with them, doesn't recognize, is not balanced in their feedback and engagement, and isn't invested in a person's success. So I will tell you, look, leaders, if you are not invested in the success of your people, they're going to know it. If it's all about you and what works for you and how you can be better, but never about them, there's going to be a group of the best people that you need around the table who are going to choose to go do something else. Look, before we run out of time, I want to make sure that we kind of shift to this whole conversation. I see some thumbs up and some hearts going up in the live broadcast, but I want to shift to the conversation about employees. And if you're working for people who are these like bad leaders, bad managers, who gaslight, who don't tell the truth, who aren't, so first of all, the best piece of advice I can give you is like, if it's like your dream job and there's really like some really great things about the job that you're trying to put bullets on your bulletin board for, then like figure out, say, I'm willing to endure this situation for this period of time so I can get these experiences and then I'm out, and be clear about getting out. The second thing is, if you can't take it and it's affecting your mental health and you're finding yourself going home and you're like upset and you're, struggling with how you're going to deal with this person every day, then it means that you got to make a change. But before you make a change, to Kate's point, because a lot of people are concerned about retaliation, and that's very real. So get your optionality up. Go out and find yourself some other options so that you have some things in the bag. So you can basically be like, look, I'm out, but before I'm out, let me give you some feedback about why I'm leaving, right? Because the exit interview is like really, really powerful. And a
Yeah.
lot of people don't use that as a way to help drive transformation and change in an organization. There is a person that I know who is like a horrible manager, right? Just horrible leader. And all of their people were leaving, right? And everybody was like, oh, and by the way, there's always gossip and chatter. People always talk about what kind of leader and kind of manager you are, whether or not you like it or not behind your back. And you'll know whether or not people want to come and work for you versus not, because they'll let you know. They won't apply for the jobs to go support you, or they'll be like, okay, well, I'm willing to do this only because I'm going to get this amount of stuff.
Yeah.
But there was this person, terrible. And so I finally just said, well, have you guys done exit interviews with their people? And they were like, well, we really haven't. I was like, well, go call them. Like, go pick up the phone and ask them why they left. And unequivocally, they were like, this person didn't support me. They were never honest with me. And by the way, the honesty always comes out in the year-end review, right? Because people will be like, oh, you're really great. You're really fantastic. You're doing a wonderful job. And then you get your rating and you're like, well, hold up. My rating doesn't reflect what you've been talking about all year long. Right. Or right. Which then indicates how your compensation is. And then, have these people who end up with these like really unhappy situations because they're like, but you've been telling me this. But yet when I look at my compensation and I look at my rating, it's not where that is. Well, those are big signals to you that that's gaslighting going on. And, when people say, oh, well, how it is, we only have a certain number of ones that we can give in the organization. And while you performed as a 1, but I didn't have enough, so I had to give you a 2, that's gaslighting and that's BS, right? So the reality is they're not being honest with you to tell you like, look, I wasn't willing to put myself on the line to give you what you deserve, if we both agree that. And so if those are the kinds of leaders that you find yourself working for, then you need to leave. And when you are interviewing for your optionality at new places, you need to probe for the culture and probe that leader for how they make decisions. How do they deal with conflict in their organization, and what are the big challenges? How do they deal with the big challenges that come their way? You'll learn a lot from what you hear from them, and then ask other people that you interview with about that leader. And LinkedIn is a great tool. You can find people who've worked for folks. I get this all the time. I'll get phone calls from recruiters who'll be like, this person is being considered for a board seat or whatever. Can you give me back channel on the real them? Guess what? Folks are going to tell it.
Yeah, and Susan, I know we're wrapping up soon, but I think the other thing is, the red flags, right? You got to go with that gut feel, but not everybody is in the financial position to be able to do that either. So to Susan, to your earlier point, start building up, right? If it's not the place for you, right, you've not seen any behavioral changes, then you better start thinking about plan B, right? How do you get to leave? Where do you go? Start looking at other companies. Look at companies that you'd love to work for. Who do you know in those companies? So that when you can leave, you feel good. You're not just walking away. Now, and I will say some people take it for much too long and then they just end up ripping the Band-Aid off. But if you're worried about that, then start working on your plan. Start thinking about where else you want to work. What does the culture look like there? And start to, again, back channel and getting perspective. I know we're right at time, but this is obviously a great topic of discussion. I think that we can weave this into probably every week's conversation. But in the absence of doing that today, we want to thank you for tuning in and just remind you that Navigating the Work Compass is now a podcast. So you can tune in each week here on LinkedIn Live, but you can also download the episodes now on Google and Apple, right? iTunes, to Navigating the Work Compass. And you can download about 20 previous episodes, not only hearing Susan and I talk about this, but also many of our guests. So we encourage you to tune in, download, and then certainly join us each week on Navigating the Work Compass.
And give us your feedback. So you can shoot us notes on LinkedIn. We'd love to hear ideas about what you're concerned about and what you're thinking about as well. And we're happy to address them during our conversation. So until the next time we talk. enjoy yourselves, take good care, be safe, and navigate the Work Compass as best as you possibly can.
You got it. Thanks, Susan. Feel better.
Thanks.